Welcome to our Climate Salad Lunch and Learn with Bloom Impact Investing co-founder Camille to talk us through impact investing. Camille, I'll hand over to you to take us through it.
Thank you, Charlotte. And hi, everyone. I'm so excited to speak to you today. Thank you for taking the time to jump on an impact investing workshop in your lunch break. Hopefully, we'll make this entertaining and interactive. So please jump in with any question you might have. So I have a bit of a presentation today, but we don't have to follow it super strictly. You can jump in and ask me questions. So what we're talking about today is my absolute favorite topic. I can go on and on about this for hours. Impact investing, how to use your money power for good. There is so much to say about this, so hopefully I will deliver practical ideas and tools for you to bring impact to your money. And no, you don't have to be rich necessarily to make an impact. So I will show you ways to start making that impact no matter where you are on the wealth ladder. So a little bit about me. My name is Camille. I am the founder of Bloom Impact Investing. I'm also a proud member of the Climate Salad community. And I know that if you're here, you are also fighting hard against climate change. So well done. And I'm so glad to be with you all today. So as you can hear, I'm not really from here. I was born in the French Alps and I arrived in Australia actually 7 years ago. That's a bit outdated. I spent a long time working in marketing, and then I had a big shift moment back in 2018 when I read the 5th IPCC report about climate change, and I decided to shift my career to serve climate impact. I spent 2 years working for Energy Lab, one of the leading clean tech Australian accelerator. So this is where I learned a ton about clean tech, and I got so excited about investing in clean energy. But I wasn't rich enough. And I was super frustrated to see that investing in clean energy like solar farm and wind farm was really restricted to the wealthiest investors, so sophisticated and wholesale investors, people who can invest 50, 100, 200 at the time, if not millions at a time. So I started Bloom in 2019 to make climate impact investing easy and accessible so that everyone in Australia not only can invest, but also benefit financially from the clean energy transition, because it's not just about doing good, it's also about building our future and our future wealth. And on the picture here, this is my co-founder, Bertrand. So again, very quickly about Bloom, so you contextualize why am I speaking to you about climate investing today. Bloom has launched 3 months ago. We are a platform that makes it easy for everyone to invest in climate impact. We have already 1 million invested on the platform. And on our app, you get access to one investment fund that invests in clean energy, clean tech, and a wide range of climate solutions that we have selected for their scientific climate impact. But I'm not here to talk about Bloom. I'm here to help you make an impact with your money. I have to have a bit of a disclaimer. Note, this is absolutely not financial advice, and it's just general information about climate investing. You have to consider whether this information is right for you, and it's always a good idea to get professional financial advice to act on anything that I'm going to mention today. Now, enough of the legalities. Let's jump straight into it. So I'm not too sure how everyone is on the journey with investing, whether or not you invest. Actually, it would be super fun if you could paste in the comments whether or not you already invest. So chuck a 1 in the chat if you already invest in anything, or 0 if you don't invest yet. And that's fine. That will give me a bit of a sense of where people are at on their journey. Let me see if I can actually see the comments. Yeah, there's a 1, 0.5. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so constantly investigating but hesitant on where to start. Awesome. Okay, so I can see people are already looking at it, but maybe, you know, there's some hesitation, or maybe you want to stretch your investing into climate impact. First of all, it's super important to get the terms right. There's a ton of different terms that qualify ethical investing. So ESG, sustainable investing, impact investing, it is not all the same. You have to think about this as a spectrum. It starts with, so from traditional investment all the way to philanthropy. And at each level, you increase your intentionality and the impact you want to make. So ESG integration is simply managing the risk, removing the bad companies like and negative screening, like tobacco, gambling. And this is simply about avoiding harm, okay? This is sort of like level 0. At Bloom, we think that's a bit, doesn't really excite us, and we really need to go further. Then you enter norm-based screening, or I guess best-in-class screening. So there you try to pick the best companies within a sector, right? So you try to get a bit of everything, but the best performing companies from an ESG perspective. So environmental, social, and governance. The problem with that is that with a good governance rating, some companies that are highly, I guess, problematic in terms of the climate could end up in an ethical fund. Q, Exxon, BHP of the world, these guys have for a long time been in some ethical funds because they have good governance. And look, that doesn't really pass our screen here at Bloom. So Q, sustainability themed investing, a little further on the right of the scale. This is where you specifically target one investment theme. So that could be sustainable agriculture, green property, low carbon investments, or maybe social impact, because maybe social is what you care about. This is where you start moving into an investment that benefits the stakeholders. And all the way to the right, you have impact investing. Impact investing is a bit different to the broader ethical investing in 2 ways. 2 criteria you have to remember. It has to be, the impact has to be measurable. It's not enough to say, oh, I invest in a couple of solar stocks. Is it really helping the clean energy transition? How much? How much megawatts of solar have you added to the grid? And the second criteria is the additionality, super duper important criteria. Additionality means the impact you are making with the investment would have not happened without your investment. And this is important. I'll give you an example. Is investing in Tesla making an additional impact? What do you guys think? Type of maybe a 1 if you think yes, 0 if you think not so much. And I love giving this example because I think everyone can relate. Yeah, 0, 0. Yeah, I think you understand where I'm going with this. The problem with investing in big listed companies, which, you know, it's also interesting, but Tesla doesn't really need my $500. It's not going to really change the side of the world. I mean, it's so much better to have my $500 versus giving it to BHP. We agree on this. But really that additionality is all about driving investment where we create something new. Yeah, there's a question. Jump in.
You're too fast. I didn't even unmute that quickly. Is it really your individual additionality that counts? Because I mean that makes it very, very subjective. You know, if you and I don't invest $500 in Tesla, that doesn't make a difference. But if nobody invests in Tesla, it makes a huge difference. So is it really your individual additionality that counts, or is it the additionality of what they're trying to achieve?
It's both. It's totally both. But I will say this additionality can exist on, again, a spectrum. When you invest $500 for Tesla, is a little something that will indeed contribute to a better climate outcome. So, you know, it is helping, but $500 for a small startup like ourselves, or a clean energy projects like a solar farm, this is a big deal, because you can really link every single dollar to an impact that would have not otherwise happened. As in, the capital was really hard to get, and your $500 is helping with this funding that was hard to get in the beginning. So it's all about a degree of like, was it hard to get this investment or not? And the hardest it was, the biggest your impact in a way. Does that make sense? Which is why VC can have such a big additional impact, or investing in infrastructure.
I don't think I want to hold up the discussion here, but I'm not quite convinced yet, to be honest, because if you're actually defining impact investment, you have to actually look at the individual investing to do that. It'll make it really hard to scale it. Because I can argue, you know, if it's hard to get $500 to save 3 bins from being empty, the impact's also very small.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's such a great counterpoint, actually. And this is why we'll dive into this later. This is why Bloom actually invests in a diversified range of assets, because you're right. There's the additionality, but there's also the scalability of the impact. Totally agree with this, and which is also why it's important to invest in listed equities, because that's where, yeah, the big companies with big market caps can actually make a dent at the speed and scale at which we need to address climate change. So yeah, that's also a very good point. But yeah, just to wrap this up, impact investing means a measurable impact, and this additionality is very important. The last point I would say is impact investing doesn't necessarily mean concessional returns. You are still, although you are contributing to solutions, you still pursue strong returns, often market returns. Then you tip over philanthropy. So philanthropy would be, you know, grants or with little or no direct financial return. So really that's where the frontier lies. So this is just a quick recap. When you do your investing, consider that, you know, your investment can exist on a scale, and it's not a bad idea to have a mix of everything. So ESG investing, where you consider the risks; sustainable investing, where you are specifically targeting an impact; and impact investing, where you try to have this additionality. Now, the difficulty is, as we know, I think I'm talking to a well-versed group, greenwashing is everywhere, and that's a really big problem in financial services. Here's a few examples that I love to share. So the problem is there is no legislation around the labeling of green products in financial services. There's actually just this year, there's been a new ASIC recommendation around the labeling, and ASIC is cracking down on people who have made false claims. So this is really positive, but there's a long way to go until we can really trust labels in financial services. So I'll just give you a few examples. Vanguard has this ethically conscious ETF, and they invest, for example, in Nestle, which is responsible for a lot of the deforestation. BlackRock has, again, an Australia ESG leader. And in there you have the super retail group, Webjet, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, who continues to lend money to fossil fuels. So it's, again, that's a problem with what you called an ESG leader. In financial speak, it might just mean that they have social and governance initiatives that make them look good, but they still contribute to the climate crisis. Spaceship has launched an Earth portfolio. So, you know, when you see Earth, you're like, cool, this is just helping the climate, awesome. And then you look under the hood and you see Nintendo, Visa, Alphabet, Alibaba, Starbucks, Twilio, Shopify, not so much helping the earth in my books. And this, you know, the list goes on and on. I don't want to point fingers at other financial institutions. I think, you know, things are moving in the right direction in general, but my tip is to always look under the hood and look at the holdings. Most products you will invest in have a product disclosure statement, and they should also disclose their holdings. So my very first and most important tip for you today, have a look at the holdings. Often it's an ugly spreadsheet that you can download on your computer, but look at the first 10 and it should give you a good indication of what this product or ETF invests in, and you can make your own opinion about whether or not this qualifies as ethical or ESG for you. Now, I'm here to talk about climate impact investing. So something I get asked a lot at Bloom is, where do I even start? Like I want to invest to create a positive climate impact, but how do you even define what a climate positive impact means? So when we created our portfolio at Bloom, it was important for me not to start from scratch. I thought there's already a ton of science, climate science available. Why don't we just use the best science available and apply it to our investing? So I've picked two models that I would love to share with you today, and hopefully that can help with picking what to invest in and what sectors you can support. So one of my favorite is Project Drawdown. It is a global framework for climate solutions, mapping the point at which the world could start drawing carbon from the atmosphere instead of adding more. And not all industries are created equal. I think you all know this on this call, but if you really want to scale your impact, you can think about supporting different sectors. The biggest one is the electricity. Anything that helps shifting our production towards clean energy is really helping, followed by food, agriculture, and land use, and then industry. So all the circles on this screen actually represent the scale of the potential impact in this model. And then you have transport, of course, and then buildings. You can also, of course, support sinks, which is, by sinks, I mean carbon sinks. That's a bit more tricky doing with investing, but it's still possible. So any investment that protect and restore our ecosystem or help shift our agriculture practices. And finally, health and education can also support outcomes, because we know that everything that support Indigenous communities actually has a direct link often to supporting our ecosystems. So hopefully that is starting to give you a view of like how to invest with climate impact. We at Bloom have selected 9 key climate impact sectors. So electricity, transportation, buildings, food industry, health and education. It gives you a huge, if you jump on the website of Project Drawdown, it gives you, it used to be 82. I think now there's over 90 different climate solutions you can invest in. Of course, they don't give you investment advice or links, but it gives you a wide range of lists. And this is handy because, as you all know, diversifying your investments is key to get sustainable returns and reducing your risks. So when you think climate investing, don't limit yourself to solar and wind and electric vehicles. There is so much more to look at, like energy efficiency solutions, smart cities, dynamic glass, alternative cement, alternative steel. I can go on and on. The list is super long. So waste management. So I would really encourage you to have a look at this list and broaden your horizon. Of course, at Bloom, we avoid the nasties. So this is everything from gambling, tobacco, deforestation, but you can also develop your own screen in terms of what you care about. Some are very specific and a bit less obvious. You might be vegan in that way, or you might be against animal cruelty, and that might also influence your screen. You might also have a faith. Faith-based investing is a thing, and you can add that to your own screen. Essentially, what I mean by this slide is you can make your own, you can start your investment journey by defining your positive screen. So your positive screen will be this, and your negative screen will be all the areas that you want to avoid. This is a good starting point to start your climate investing journey. Now, I want to move on to the returns question. I'm sure you've asked yourself, yeah, that sounds cool, but am I going to get good results? And because we all invest to get a return after all. I'm here to tell you that you don't have to sacrifice returns when you do sustainable investing. This is a snapshot of the latest RIA, so Responsible Investing Australasia Association research on the latest performance of the responsible investment funds versus their non-ethical equivalent. Over the last 1, 3, 5, and 10 years periods, on average, the responsible investment funds have all outperformed their benchmark. So as you can see, on a 10-year period, 8.2% up compared to 6.9% for the multi-sector growth. On the international share, there's the same outperformance except for the 10 years window. And there's a bit of a mixed performance on the Australian window of funds. So again, it's important for you to diversify and look for investments that cover multiple geographies, not just Australia, and multiple sectors is key. There's also this meta study that I love to share on the returns. That proves a correlation between ESG and financial performance. In a recent meta study, so meta study being a mix, like just a big recap of lots of different published papers in sustainable finance, the New York Stern Center for Sustainable Finance has found that a 58% correlation between ESG and financial performance, focused on return on investment and also stock price. They have also found, and this is super interesting for our current environments, I'm sure you all know that markets have been really difficult lately and volatile. This study has found that sustainable investing and any investment that has a strong environmental, social, and governance aspect is a fantastic downside protection, especially during a social or economic crisis. And this is super interesting because throughout COVID, it has also been a really big test of ESG investing. And we've seen funds being more resilient than their normal benchmark. So sustainable investing is a good protection for risk and volatility as well. Yeah, this is another graph. Top ESG companies outperform the benchmark laggards, and being I guess underperforming in terms of environmental, social, and governance can also mean underperforming financially. So this is, hopefully I've convinced you that you don't have to let go of performance when you do ESG investing. But of course, we're not just investing for returns. We care about climate impact in this community. And investing for our climate is a must. Climate finance for mitigation must be 3 to 6 times higher by 2030 if we want to limit global warming to below 2 degrees, not even 1.5. The IPCC report states that we need to accelerate climate finance 7 times by 2030 if we want a chance to limit global warming. And the problem is finance for fossil fuels still outstrips funding for climate action, which is super sad. So we need every bit of climate finance we can use to accelerate our transition. But again, it's not just for climate impact. It's a multi-trillion opportunity. And don't take it from me, take it from Larry Fink, one of the biggest asset manager in the world, managing BlackRock, the CEO of BlackRock, who said, "It is my belief that the next 1,000 unicorns companies that have a market valuation over $1 billion won't be search engine, won't be media companies. They will be business developing green hydrogen, green agriculture, green steel, and green cement." So Larry Fink is not really a philanthropist. He cares about the returns of his assets and his funds. He manages over 7 trillion. Last time I checked. So there's a reason, there's a true business case to be made about investing in clean tech. And I don't need to convince you, but as you know, the world is shifting to clean energy, and the next wealth opportunity is really coming from those new technologies. I want to stop for a second about the case of making an impact with a small amount of money, because some of you might be thinking, yeah, that sounds good, but I don't have millions to invest. So is it really going to make a difference? There's this super interesting study that Future Super has made in 2020 with True Cost about the impact one superannuation fund can make compared to our individual actions. So I'm not here to discourage those individual actions. We all know that every single bit counts, and we need to recycle. We need to shift to eating plant-based diets. But I think what people don't realize is how big an impact their finance can make. I think a lot of people are going to great length to do all the right things by the climate, but they just don't take care of their finance in that way. So in this study, Future Super has found that shifting $32,000 from a super fund that has exposure to fossil fuels to a green superannuation fund like Future Super could remove 5.8 tons of carbon emissions from the atmosphere. And that's huge compared to recycling, to shifting to green electricity, which is all super important, but shifting our finance, so our banking, our super, and the way we invest can make, for some individuals can be the biggest impact they can make. I also want to stop and acknowledge the fantastic progress the Australian clean tech industry has made over the last 6 years. So this is a snapshot of the last 5 years by the Deloitte Australian Clean Tech Index. Deloitte has tracked the performance, financial performance of the 90 best listed climate impact companies in Australia compared to the ASX 200. And guess what? It has outperformed the ASX 200 for 6 years in a row. In the last 5 years, the Clean Tech Index has returned a 78% return compared to the ASX 36%. In other words, if you had the confidence to invest in the clean tech sector in a diversified manner 5 years ago, you would have completely smashed the ASX target and you would have returned over 70%. But of course, 5 years ago, people weren't so bullish on the clean tech sector and maybe have missed on the opportunity. And this is my favorite slide. I think in Australia, there's traditional investors have built their wealth investing in mining. And, there's no denying that the mining sector has brought wealth, jobs, and prosperity to Australia for a very long time. But things are moving, and fossil fuel stocks were the worst performing sector in the ASX over the last decade. Of course, there's been a rebound recently with surging fossil fuel prices, which I hope will not make you invest in those things. But when you zoom out and you look at a large window of time, so the last decade, an investment portfolio that included the top 300 companies on the ASX, but excluding companies involved in the fossil fuel industry, would have improved annual returns by 8.6% over the last decade. I think that's quite remarkable. This is just more performance data. So this is a great example of the different sectors that I mean by when I talk about climate impact investing. So not just renewable energy, also water, waste, sustainable minerals, and efficiency and energy storage are areas that you can look at. Australian investors love to invest in Australian stocks because that's companies that they love and they know and they understand. But in this workshop, I wanted to also share that it's important to have a large window. So the thing with the Australian clean tech company from a financial perspective is there are a lot of small to medium market cap. That's just jargon speak to say that our clean tech companies that are listed on the stock exchange are not huge yet. They have small to medium capitalization behind them. And this is great. That means that, they are still quite small. Their stock isn't worth like $1 gazillion and you can buy quite a lot of shares. They can be well positioned for growth, but you also need to diversify your portfolio with larger, more established companies in climate. And these companies often are overseas. So this is an example of the Global Clean Energy Index versus the S&P Global 1,200. Again, outperforming the benchmark. So maybe I should take a pause. Any question? This is supposed to be a workshop, so maybe I'm talking a bit too much. I'm about to move on to the part where we discuss ideas and example of things you can invest in. But any questions so far? If not, all good. I'll jump in. So one thing I'm super passionate about is telling people that investing for climate impact does not stop at investing in Tesla. Because most people think solar stocks and Tesla when I talk about climate investing. There is so much more. And it spans the full asset class spectrum. What do I mean by asset class? Asset class is essentially just a type of investment. The most well-known is stocks, so what we called listed equities. Here's a bunch of equities you can look at. Again, not financial advice, do your own research, but this is just to give you an idea. Oatly, Acciona, Canadian Solar. You might ask DocuSign, why is it there? Well, telepresence, everything that removes, that empowers us not to travel so much and decrease transport emissions. So that's a smart way to do your climate investing. NEO, of course, electric cars, Canadian Solar, Meridian, Wolfspeed, Halma are a few ideas. You can look at ETFs. So ETFs are exchange traded funds. They give you a wide, it's in just one trade, they give you access to a wide range of companies. So it's an easy way to diversify your portfolio. So a couple you can look at: the iShares Global Clean Energy ETF, the BetaShares Climate Change Innovation ETF, the Crane Shares Global Carbon ETF, the VanEck Global Clean Energy ETFs. These are 4 ETFs that we love at Bloom, and we have actually within our fund to give like a wide, diversified access to investing. I'm not endorsing these ETFs. Again, I would recommend that you jump on their website and you look at their holdings to make sure you're happy with what you're seeing. Often they will tell you, they will give you a bit of a pie chart about how much they are investing in each sector and the range of companies they invest in. And you can look for yourself for the holdings. A way to assess ETFs, and sorry if I'm telling things that you already know, is looking at their fees and their track record in terms of performance. So usually for an ETF, you are looking at anything under 1% is preferable in terms of fees, because these investments are often passive. So you don't want to pay too much for a passive index that just follows a benchmark. But if it's a bit more active and they have asset managers behind it that actively seek to beat a benchmark, then it might be worth paying a bit more. So this is where your management fees will go more towards the 1% versus 0.5 or 0.2%. I would argue that the best and most exciting part of climate investing is looking beyond the listed companies. Listed companies will give you diversity, will give you good impact, but I'm super passionate about other types of assets, namely alternatives, infrastructure, private, and bonds. I think this can make a huge impact for our climate, and they come with different risk profile and different return profile. And again, it's all about diversifying your portfolio. I'm going to give you a few examples. At Bloom, we love Plenty. Plenty helps Australians put solar on their roof and also help them buy electric cars. They enable peer-to-peer lending for clean energy. And essentially, within our fund, we invest in Plenty and we get a fixed income from it. So this is a smaller risk profile than your listed company, not without risk, but it's a different profile. And you know exactly where your money is going. You know that it's going to Australian people who are putting solar on their roof. So in terms of additionality, like we said before, this is a beautiful investment where you know that your investment is really helping. We also have in our portfolio a company called ESCO. ESCO help Australian businesses shift to clean energy and improve their sustainability. And it's things you would never think about. For example, they help aquatic centers shift to more efficient ways to heat their pools, for example. So we love ESCO, and this is part of our portfolio. You can also look at sustainable and green bonds. Green bonds are earmarked to be helping clean energy projects. So again, this is a lower risk profile. This is more what we call a defensive asset to reduce the risk of your portfolio whilst still delivering a positive climate impact. The problem with bonds is that a lot of them are not listed. They are not accessible for you to buy as you would buy a stock, for example, which is why we've incorporated it in our Bloom portfolio to make it more accessible for small investors like us. And finally, very impactful investment, which I don't personally do, but you can do through a crowdfunding platform, is helping startups like us get off the ground and make the impact they need to make. You can jump on Raise and Virtual. They have lots of investing options in climate impact companies that you can support. One last thing before we jump onto Q&A. How are we going for time? Yeah, perfect. Don't forget, investing is not just investing for climate impact. Doesn't stop at investing on the stock market. The way you bank, the way you use your super, and the energy retailer you use is climate impact investing. This money makes a huge impact. The superannuation industry is a multi-trillion industry. What would happen if this money was intentionally invested for climate impact? Huge, huge impact. The self-managed super fund industry is even bigger. I don't know if any person in this school has a self-managed super fund, but the self-managed super fund industry in Australia represent 882 billion in management. Absolutely huge in terms of impact it could make. And again, this wealth is mostly invested in property and traditional investments. What if we could shift this money through innovative clean tech solutions? Imagine the impact we could have. So I'm going to recommend a website. You can jump onto marketforces.org.au. If you haven't heard of them, I absolutely love their job. They give you a clear list of banks and super options in terms of how much they contribute to the climate crisis or not. They will tell you exactly whether or not they have invested in fossil fuel projects. So you can sleep at night knowing that your bank is not funding the climate crisis. You would be surprised how many banks are still funding fossil fuel projects. So example of banks, there's a lot of them actually. Up Bank, Bank Australia, Bendigo Bank, Me Bank. A lot of them have never and will never fund fossil fuel projects. Super, there's a range, there's so many of them now. Australian Ethical, Aware Super, Uni Super, Verve Super. Personally, I'm with Future Super because I love their work. And energy retailers, there's a ton. I'm sure you know of them, but don't forget to support them. Amber Electric, Power Shop, Energy Locals, and so forth. So that's about it. If you want more ideas about what to invest in, you can actually download the Bloom app for free. You don't have to become an investor. We have a preview function where you can see what we invest in and why. And of course, if you would like to get started, we actually allow any individual investor to start their climate investing journey from $500. It takes 5 minutes to sign up, and you can see exactly what you invest in one single trade. You get access to all the things I've mentioned earlier: companies, listed, unlisted, green bonds, and energy projects that are right here in Australia making positive impact. This is the link. You can find the app on behind these barcodes. And I think that's it. Thank you so much. I hope there are some questions because I've spent a lot of time talking and I'm here to help you. So shoot questions.
Can you start by going back one slide so I have a bit more time to scan the code?
Of course.
Thank you.
Camille, thank you so much. And Guido, yes, of course, if you have questions, please, this is your opportunity to dive deep in Camille's brain, who's been in the thick of it for a while and actively investing people's funds through Bloom into these wonderful, impactful climate future businesses. How long has Bloom been open for? Because you recently reached that threshold of $1 million in funds in this impact space.
3 months ago, we've launched in April.
Wow.
Yeah, but we've been designing, it's been a long journey. So I've started Bloom in 2019 and we've spent a whole lot of time and to build the portfolio in alignment with our climate impact research. So yeah, Bloom is a new fund, but not so new in terms of the research and passion that has gone into it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. Has anyone started to look into investing? What has been your experience? Have you looked at different products? Do you have your doubts? I'm really keen to actually hear from you.
Maybe I should go. I've been, thinking about it in terms of money I put aside for the kids, in just a bank account. And I'm like, there's something much better we can be doing that with it. And I have downloaded Bloom Impact app. And it's good. I can sort of talk to my partner more about those returns. I'm motivated by the impact that they can have, but I know, anything's better than just the tiny little bit of interest an account accrues. Who are your typical customers? Is it that sort of people who are looking for, their children's account, or is it all retirees with a, great surplus of funds where they're not sure where to put it?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have a slightly older audience than what we anticipated. So typically our investors are between 30 and 45 years old. Either they do invest as individuals because they already invest, but they cannot find exposure to clean energy projects and infrastructure. So they already invest in listed stocks, but they want that exposure to things that are unlisted and are hard to access, whether if you don't have like thousands and thousands to invest. Or we have also some self-managed super funds. So people who manage their own super and again want to diversify their portfolio with a bit of ESG. Maybe they invest in property and all sorts of things, but they want exposure through ESG and clean tech investing. And we have an equal balance of women and males. So this is nice because a lot of, this I'm really proud of, because a lot of financial products have a tilt towards men. So it's great to see that, women are getting involved. And women are fantastic investors. They invest for the long term. They are less fidgety with their investments, which means that in the long term, sometimes they beat their male counterparts who might be a bit more impatient with their investments. So it's great to see we have a good mix.
Camille, I've got a question from a data point of view. Interested in your view in terms of where you see the gaps from the reporting companies or the reporting entities. And how do you think we're going to close the gap? Because clearly, reporting on ESG is tricky. The E is probably that's hard, but it's probably the one that you can get the easiest. But the S and the G seems to be quite a hard one to quantify.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
How are you seeing that, and the role that, say, we could play as an industry to help support that?
This is such a great question. We could have a full session on this. Okay, here's the problem. You have big companies who have the means to do some very in-depth detailed reporting. And there's a website that I love to share called the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Protocol. You can actually, and that's actually a nifty little tool if you are doing your own research, where you can actually see the rating of a company in terms of their carbon disclosure. So some disclose it and you have all the data available, happy days, but some don't disclose it. And it's a problem because, well, first of all, as an investor, it doesn't give you much transparency, but also it rules out some really good companies from getting invested. And here's what I mean. Sometimes really good clean tech companies that are listed on the stock exchange are fairly small, and they don't have the means to pay a fancy ESG analyst to do their fancy sustainable reporting. And as a result, some big ESG data reporting tools like MSCI or Sustainalytics rule them out because they are not because the data is just not available. And at Bloom, we think that there's no shortcut. You have to do your own research as an asset manager or as an investor, and reach out to the company and ask the questions yourself and do your own investigation when the data is not there. So I think, to answer your question, as an industry, we have to be both demanding. We have to demand more transparency, more data. We have to push for common standards so that everyone can have a proper conversation about comparing apples to apples. But we also have to be somewhat patient and compassionate for the small guys who don't have the means yet to have all this fancy reporting. And we have to be, we have to create our own lens to make sure we don't miss out on investing in great companies just because they don't have the right reportings. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
or?
no, it could be a whole session on itself. It could be a whole day, to be fair. Thanks for it's just a follow-up question. So around the actual ESG, do you think we're doing enough to really define what ESG is and explain to people what that means? Because it just seems crazy when ExxonMobil can be in the top 100 and Tesla not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's silly. This is my passion. This is why I've created Bloom, because I was like, this is garbage. I do not agree with all these ESG. The way these ESG funds is built is just nonsense. Why isn't there a fund that takes the best climate science available and builds a fund accordingly? Why hasn't this been made before? Why are we reinventing the wheel? And the problem is, the why is simply because the financial industry is not very creative and has looked at investing from a just a financial perspective. They take the financial data, they make the analysis, and then they overlay some sort of positive screen. So they look at the financial data and then they pick a few solid stock. Boom, here you go. You have a solid. You have. I
made a comment when you were presenting around, I think the BlackRock fund, that 2.5 to 3 degrees warming. Like if that's the objective of a fund.
Yeah.
Clearly
yeah. Great. Thanks, guys.
They can keep Nestle in their fund, right? So
absolutely.
If they went to 1.5, they probably wouldn't have any companies to invest in.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think we should tip that framework on its head. Why not starting with the positive screening first, and then, of course, making the robust financial analysis that needs to be made? This is my personal view, but I think I have another question from Grant. Oh, hey, Grant.
Hey, Camille. As you know, I'm a big fan of Bloom, so from the get-go. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of user adoption for your product, where does that stand now? Is it as planned? Is it be above your expectation? And as this group, as you know, it's already like a lot of us are climate tech companies. What could we do to help Bloom be a success that it should be?
Oh, thank you. That's awesome to hear that. Okay, the customer growth is going nicely. It hasn't been an explosive growth, but we're happy in the way it's tracking along. The beautiful surprise we had is the average customer balance is a lot higher than what we were anticipating, which is great. So for individuals, it's sitting around $3,000 per account, and for self-managed funds and trusts, it's actually sitting around the 10,000 mark. So this is great news. That means we attract, high value customers who are there to invest for the long term, not like they're not hoping for a quick return and then moving out of the fund. I think we have them. These are loyal customers that we will nurture and keep. But now we need to scale our funds under management. Bloom, we need to move billions away from fossil fuels into climate solutions. And Bloom right now has just 1 million. So we need to accelerate this. We need to get to 20. We need to get to 40. So the best way to help Bloom is any single customer helps us. if you know anyone in your network who could even invest 500, this makes a difference to our business. So we really need to crack our first 1,000 users because then, it's easier to grow, it's easier to get reviews and so forth. So best way to help us is to refer customers to us.
Cool. Thanks, Camille.
Thank you so much. There's other questions. Hi, Paul.
Hey there. I just have a very basic question, and it's just building off that discussion around ESG and the other criteria. I was wondering, is it correct to sort of think about ESG as basically the performance of, in a very literal sense, what the company does? So it's, governance, or it might be literally the emissions of our office. Whereas, and I think that one of the challenges here is that the term ESG would make people think about the impact of the company, right? Like the actual, where do the emissions go? So, in a technical sense, ESG doesn't necessarily look at scope 3 emissions. So the impact on climate change, it would literally be more interested in, whether the office block the company has rented is green.
Yes, I think that's correct. So one thing I'm going to reply to this question is ESG is essentially a risk mitigation framework for financial institutions. That's the way, ESG is a lot of things, but from a financial, from the perspective of fund managers, ESG is essentially mitigating the environmental, social, and governance risk of the asset. And there's a new terminology popping up a lot in the industry at the moment, which is climate risk and stranded assets. So this is the idea that companies who are not strong on the E of ESG are not well positioned to take advantage of the climate transition. And therefore, they will suffer from climate change. Think of it for a second. Insurance companies, they are losing billions because of extreme weather events. So there's a wide range of companies that are actually at risk of losing a lot of value because they are going to get disrupted, and they are already disrupted by climate change. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your questions. I'm just carried away on the topic.
Can I try what I've sort of derived in my investment and experience in that space? I think to me, I think, and it's a question really, because I'm not sure it's right. But I would probably, if I wanted to simplify completely, ESG is about how a company does what it does, whereas impact is aiming at what the company does. So, Tesla has a potentially huge impact, but it's actually dropped out of ESG funds because of its abysmal social internal structures and how it's actually governed.
Yep.
So it's trying to do the right things, but it's doing them in a horrible way. That's kind of like the logic between those two, right? So in my view, ESG is kind of how do you do what you do, and whereas impact is what are you trying to achieve with an impact towards the world. And I know that overlaps, but how would you answer that type of simplification?
Sorry, can you rephrase the last last part?
So
Sorry,
I know that what I'm saying is simplifying it, right? But basically, to get the point across between ESG and impact, I'm sort of tempted to believe that ESG is about how you do what you do as a company.
Yes.
Whereas impact is about what you do as a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess ESG is looking at how you engage with all your stakeholders, from your workforce, your clients, all the supply chain really of your business. Yeah, I agree with that. And impact, I guess, is the outcomes of your existence as a business, and whether or not this is shifting the dial on any specific problem the world is facing, should it be social or environmental, by the way. And there's often an overlap, actually, when people care about their people and they care about the planet, or when they care about the planet, they should care about their people as well. And you're right, Tesla is such a great example of how complex this is, right? Because on one hand, they are really driving change. They are one of the biggest electric car makers they do electric storage, they innovate. But on the other hand, yes, quite questionable social practices. They do not report on their carbon emissions really well. Their founder is problematic in my view. So it's a balance of like, but that's the tricky part of investing. It's never, but the thing is, it's never, we can't wait for perfect. We have to get going. And this is why. And
I was just going to pause there just to say thank you, because I know that a few people.
It's the end. Yeah.
I know we're even over, and Camille is doing this conference. She's taking a lunch break from this amazing financial disclosure or financial summit to do this workshop. So gosh, it's been so fascinating. I didn't even realize the time that we're over an hour already. Thank you so much for imparting, sharing your insights with Bloom. Please do access the Climate Salad Bloom offer perk that we have for our members. Thank you so much. I'm sure you can all join me in thanking Camille. And
thank you so much.
In Brisbane on the 17th of August, Camille will be pitching and demonstrating, and there's a lucky door prize for an impact investing pack from Bloom. So please come on down or come on up.
And my calendar is always open for Climate Salad members. If you want to have a yarn about investing, just as you can see, I can talk about it a lot. So just reach out, and I'd love to have a chat.